Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again, it is Sunday, and that means it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you, as my viewers and subscribers, about something that deals with guns, gun culture, politics, current events, the news, or something fun like EDC that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. And this week's question is a hypothetical. It is asking you about the most ubiquitous caliber for semi-automatic pistols in the world, the 9mm, 9x19 Parabellum. I know if you own a pistol and are watching this channel, most likely you own at least one pistol chambered in this caliber. Militaries around the world use it. Police in almost every city, state, and municipality use a handgun chambered in this caliber. But what if you weren't able to buy pistols in this caliber ever again, for whatever reason? That's not the scope of this question. It's just a hypothetical. I was curious what calibers that currently exist you would gravitate towards and why. After all, the 9mm is the great compromise between power and capacity. The reason it is so popular is that it is so versatile. Some people say it does nothing great, but everything good. So if you weren't able to get this caliber or buy a gun chambered in this caliber, you'd have to move to something else. So what's the next great thing? Would you go for more capacity? Would you go for more power? Would you try to find another caliber that is a compromise? So, with all that said, let's dive right into this week's question. This week's question comes from a subscriber on my Rumble channel. By far the most popular caliber for semi-automatic pistols in the United States, and possibly the world, is 9mm, 9x19. With new ballistic technology, projectile designs, and propellants, many of the perceived advantages of other calibers have been minimized. However, if you could no longer own or buy pistols chambered in 9mm, which caliber would you move to and why? And by the way, if you have other questions that you think you would like to pose here on the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, make sure you email me at texasgunvault@gmail.com. I would love to get your ideas and thoughts. But let's talk about this question real fast. I've already told you a little bit about it in the beginning. Of course, this is a hypothetical. Is this something that we are facing here in the United States or something that has been proposed? Absolutely not. I was just curious because 9mm being so popular, it has its advantages. It's available and so many guns are chambered for it. But all of a sudden, if we couldn't get that, what would you go to? And I kind of thought this would give us an insight to your thinking. As I said, maybe it's an argument of power, maybe it's an argument of capacity, or let's find another middle of the road caliber. So with all that said, let's see what you guys had to say with this week's results. With 977 votes as of me filming this video, we have 45 ACP, big, fat, and slow. And because they don't make a 46, 50%. 40 Smith & Wesson, about the same capacity, just a little snappier, 27%. 380, 9x17mm, less powerful, but same capacity, 6%. 22 long rifle, cheap and available, better than nothing, 4%. And something else, 357 SIG, 50 AE, 25 ACP, 32 ACP, etc., 14%. Now, please remember, I only get 5 options on these YouTube polls, so I really wanted to add a whole bunch of calibers, but I couldn't. I sure hope that one day they give me 10 options instead of 5. I think these polls would be much more thorough, so I have to kind of phrase these the way that I think is going to get the best results. And to be honest with you, I was once again not surprised. Here in the United States, which is where a majority of my viewers come from, the 45 ACP just has a mystique to it because for so long it was the definitive semi-automatic caliber. So here we have one of my Colt 1911s. This is my lightweight Commander. This is one of my concealed carry pistols with these awesome Brownworks grips on them. Yeah, that has the Texas Gun Vault logo. I absolutely love that. But yeah, 45 ACP. Every company that makes a pistol in 9mm makes one in 45. The downside with 45, however, is for the most part you can't use the same frames and just scale the design up. Now you can scale 45s down to 9, but often 9mm can't be scaled up to 45. For example, take a look at Glocks. When Glock came out with the Glock 17, it's a 9mm. They were able to scale it up to 40, but when they went to 45, they had to have a much thicker frame. And for me, this is the big downside to 45. While in the early 20th century, a 45 caliber cartridge was advantageous, especially during the world wars and the type of fighting that our soldiers had to do. However, in today's world, we have things like body armor, and we have to think about the ballistics, not just the knockdown power. And so for me, 45, while it definitely is a very cool caliber, and I know my friend Andrew from Australia is going to tell me I am completely off the rails with this, I actually think the days of 45 are kind of numbered. Not that guns aren't going to be chambered for them anymore, I just don't find them to be an effective cartridge. In today's world, we like capacity, and we like to think about things like barrier penetration. And to be honest with you, 45 just doesn't hold water in that category. And yes, there are guns like the FNX 45 Tactical that holds 15 rounds. But a gun of that size chambered in 9mm can easily hold 22 to 25 rounds. You just get so much more capacity. And then when it comes to the ballistics, a 45 ACP projectile is moving slower than the speed of sound. And today, when it comes to all these ballistic gel tests, we like barrier penetration. And even though the slug, the actual projectile, is bigger, it's traveling at such a low velocity, we lose a lot of that penetration. Yes, you still do get knockdown power, but you lose capacity and you lose that penetration. And for me, 45 is just simply too big. Even John Browning thought 45 was too big. In fact, he proposed to Colt and the US military to go with a 41 caliber projectile, not a 45. So even John Browning kind of is on my side on this one. But I knew it was going to get the majority because it's the American caliber. It's big, fat, obese, and slow, like many foreigners think us Americans are. And so to have our definitive caliber chambered in something that for them defines America is kind of apropos. But 45 is still a great cartridge, but for me, if I couldn't get 9, I would not gravitate towards 45. Then we have 40 Smith & Wesson, about the same capacity, just a little snappier. And although I said earlier that the 9mm is the great compromise, many people think 40 is an even greater compromise. It's something between the knockdown power of a 45 and the capacity of a 9, but it's a higher pressure cartridge and it's much more snappy. So here is my HK USP Compact, and this one right now is chambered in 357 SIG. However, I do have the 40 caliber original slide for this. So we'll talk about 357 SIG in just a moment. But when it comes to 40, it's definitely not my favorite caliber. I have complained many times. It's just too snappy of a cartridge. And the main reason for that is many companies that make 9mm just chamber 40 in these 9mm frames. They're often smaller guns and they're not designed for those higher pressures. Yes, they could handle them, but they're just snappy. But when it comes to a gun that was designed around a 40 caliber projectile and the pressures of 40 Smith & Wesson, it's a much more enjoyable shooting experience. And that's what the HK USP is and why I brought it out. Even though the USP is chambered in 9, 45, 40, and 357 SIG, the original design came out around the introduction of the 40 Smith & Wesson. And so the frame is a little bit beefier, the slide is a little bit thicker. Where other semi-automatic guns will wear out on 40, the USP will not. So then when they chambered down to 9mm, you got an even more robust platform. But a gun that was designed for 40 can handle that recoil and those pressures a lot better. And so if I was going to go to 40, I would definitely say buy a gun that was originally designed around the 40 Smith & Wesson, not a gun that was rechambered for it from another caliber. To me, the advantages of this cartridge, if I could not get 9mm, once again, is the power and the capacity. You do lose a little bit of capacity, but not as much as you do when it comes to 45. And when it comes to home defense or personal protection, you have to admit that projectile traveling at a higher velocity is going to be more advantageous, especially if you have to defeat barriers or some type of body armor or clothing. Now, granted, body armor for the most part will defeat most handgun calibers. However, if somebody is really bundled up, say it's the wintertime, a 40 Smith & Wesson is going to be better than some other calibers. And for me, this is most likely the one that I would vote on. Not that I like 40. In fact, out of all the options here, 40 is honestly one of my least favorite calibers. I don't enjoy shooting it with the exception of just a few guns. However, without the 9mm, it would probably be my go-to caliber, not only because of its performance, but also its availability. Now, the other caliber that I'm going to talk about is the 357 SIG, and that's going to be the fifth option, which, as I said, this gun is currently chambered for with a 357 SIG slide and barrel. Because the 357 SIG uses the 40 as its parent case, it is easy to chamber one gun from the other. It's a really cool idea. I think SIG, when they designed the 357 SIG, had that in mind and made the engineering so much nicer. Now, there's many advantages to 357 SIG. And honestly, it's probably my favorite handgun caliber, with one caveat: its price and availability. One thing I didn't add to this poll was price and availability. So I guess all things being equal, I would vote for 357 SIG. However, 40 is much more available and more affordable than 357 SIG. So on this poll, it's the one that I would have voted for. Now let's talk about the next option, 380. This is also another very popular caliber here in the US because you can chamber this caliber in very small guns, which once again, I don't like. Now, one of my favorite 380s to shoot is this Beretta 84. Yeah, the 84 FS. This thing holds 13 rounds of 380. It has a pretty darn big capacity for a 380, and it's also a pretty big gun. Now, one of the advantages to 380 is that it is not as powerful as 9mm, so often these are recommended to new shooters and female shooters. However, when you put them in such small packages, they're more snappy than 9mm. However, in a bigger gun, they're very good. And this is where I was going to talk about other countries that have to deal with this. One of those countries is Mexico. Even though they have a right enshrined in their constitution to own firearms, they're not allowed by law to own a gun chambered in a military caliber. So they have to choose, what am I going to buy? So they kind of have to think about this question. And probably the most popular caliber is 380. And many guns from Mexico, like the Glock 28, which you've probably never heard of, and the Glock 25, which you've never heard of, are about the size of a Glock 19 or a Glock 26, but chambered in 380. They're unobtaining them here in the United States because there's no real market for them outside of just collectors. But in Mexico, they're very popular because they're big, robust guns that can hold a lot of capacity and be chambered in a caliber that they are legally allowed to have. So you only get a little bit of loss, and granted, 380 is about the lowest you want to go when it comes to personal protection, but it's still a pretty adequate round, especially with current ballistic technology. So if I couldn't own a 9mm, 380 might be an option, but I would definitely go with a larger gun with more capacity. Then we have 22 long rifle, cheap and available, better than nothing. And I wanted to put this on here because there's a lot of people that follow my channel that really like 22. And there has been some people that I have met in my personal life that prefer 22. Even though it is a rimfire cartridge and not reliable at all, they want to use it for personal protection because maybe it's all they can handle. Maybe they're older or they have arthritis, which I can appreciate because I have rheumatoid arthritis myself. And so some people think, well, if I can't have those other calibers, 22 would be perfectly adequate for my self-defense. And 4 people thought that. Now, personally, I would not vote for this because I would rather have a center fire cartridge, but I want to give people that option. And then finally, we have something else, 357 SIG, 50 AE, 25 ACP, 32 ACP, etc. etc. And one of my favorite guns to carry, and you guys are probably going to laugh because of its size, this is a Beretta 950 BS chambered in 25 ACP. Now, this is not a substantial self-defense handgun. However, in the summer months, when I'm just wearing t-shirt and shorts and I'm out walking the dog, man, it can get hot here in Texas. We're talking 110 degrees. And so having a gun like this in a little pocket holster is about all that I can carry when I'm outside like that. So what a lot of people don't know is that the 25 ACP was actually designed by John Browning, and the whole idea of it was to create a caliber that was similar in ballistics to .22 long rifle, but could be center fire, so it uses a small pistol primer, which is a lot more reliable. I definitely do think there still is a place for this caliber, and unfortunately it's one of those calibers that is kind of dying, just because it's pretty much only chambered in mouse guns. However, in other countries around the world, like in Europe, the 25 ACP was pretty popular for a large portion of the 20th century. And I was just curious if anybody wanted to carry this if they couldn't have 9mm. After all, you can get a very small gun chambered in this caliber, and it's pretty darn comfortable to shoot. So that's what I think about all this. So now let's see what you guys had to say with the top rated comments of the week. And with our top rated comment of the week, we have, I chose the 45. The reasons you gave for the 9 becoming the most popular can be applied to the 45 also. And I agree, the ballistic advantage of 9mm now, because of all the technology, can be applied to every other caliber. But there's one thing though. The 45 is just so much bigger. You lose that capacity. And I like the larger capacity rather than the more powerful cartridge. That's just a personal preference, but I knew a lot of people would also agree with that statement. Then we have Douglas Swinford, who said, I actually started shooting my older cousin's Ruger single action. It was chambered in .357 mag with a convertible cylinder for 9mm. So naturally, at the tender age of 13, the 9mm was perfect. But as I got older, I gravitated to the old 45 ACP and the 1911. It wasn't until manufacturers started making better 9mm ammunition that I ended up buying a SIG P226. With the new powders and bullets for the 9mm, it became my favorite cartridge again. That was a great question you asked us this time. Well, I am glad that you liked it. And as I said, if you have any ideas for potential questions in the future, email me, texasgunvault@gmail.com. It's really interesting to think that the 9mm was designed by Georg Luger in Germany. I believe it was in 1902, but it was a proprietary cartridge. It was not designed to be the cartridge it was today. Essentially, he had another cartridge that was a necked down cartridge or a bottleneck cartridge that he expanded to the 9mm projectile. It's a really interesting history. Then we have Michael Head, who says, the 45 ACP market, I believe, is ready for double stack pistols. 12 plus capacity, like the late SIG P227 or FNX 45, but slightly more compact, suited for carry. SAR USA has a great candidate in their K245 and 45C. I'm hoping they follow them up with optics-ready models at the next SHOT Show. And that's definitely a possibility in the future. If more manufacturers come out with better design guns that are smaller, I believe there could be a renaissance of 45. But once again, they're having to deal with that larger cartridge that's much wider in the magazine, so you have to change the magazine dimensions. But then what are you going to do about people having to carry double stack 45s if they have very small hands? Fortunately, I have large hands. It doesn't bother me, but I know some people even today have a very difficult time holding double stack 45s, and I think that would be the big disadvantage. Then we have Joey Phillips, who says, 10mm or 40 because they're both two of my favorite rounds. And yes, the same bullet technology that made 9mm better is applied to 40 Smith & Wesson, and it does better at making permanent wound channels. Only downside is it may wear your gun out faster if you shoot it a ton. But most of us don't shoot that much and choose quality handguns and don't really have to worry about that. Since 10mm isn't an option, I chose 40. Well, 10mm really was an option. It was in that other catch-all category. And the reason I didn't put it as one of the main options is that it's limited. It's not that available. Yes, I know people say there's tons of it out there. go to your gun show, go to your gun shop, and you'll see stacks and stacks of 9, stacks and stacks of 45, and you'll see a small quantity of 10. But then there's not a lot of guns chambered in it as compared to the other calibers. So most casual gun owners aren't even aware of that caliber. So I wanted to kind of put that in that catch-all category. And Joey also mentions here that the ballistic technology added to 40 makes that even more effective. And so once again, all things being even, I probably would have voted for the 40 myself in this poll. And then finally, we have Machi74005 who says, I would go with the 45 because I already have a bunch and my HK USP has started running more reliably, much to my pleasant surprise. It didn't run reliably from the beginning. These HK USPs are some of the most reliable handguns in the world. They're built like tanks. Maybe yours just needed a break-in period, but I've never really known HKs to need a break-in period. But that's what you guys had to say. It was a great thought experiment, and obviously I was in the minority on this one, but a lot of you think the 45 would still reign supreme in a post-9mm world. So that's the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. I hope you like this. And as I said, if you have any ideas for future questions, please email me and let me know, and maybe I will choose and use it. So what do you guys think? Are my thoughts on this topic weird? Am I wrong? If so, tell me in the comments section below. And if you want to participate in next week's poll, please go to the community tab of my YouTube channel. I will also post a link in the description below. Go over there, see what the poll is about, vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top rated comment of the week. I also want to take a moment and send you guys to my Rumble channel, which I have a link in the description, as well as the Texas Gun Vault 2, a behind the scenes channel that's growing a little bit every single month. It's a very casual behind the scenes channel where I can talk about things that I can't always flesh out onto full videos here on the main channel. So I'd love to have you guys visit me there as well. So let me know in the comment section below why I am wrong, because I know a lot of you think I am. So, as always, thanks for watching.